Shalom, I'm Mark Regev, and I'm here in Jerusalem at the studios of JNS, and we are here for another edition of Israel Undiplomatic. And as per usual, next to me sitting is my co-host, Ruthie Blum. How are you today, Ruthie?
Pretty good, Mark. Before we start, I would like to request of our viewers that if you like our broadcast, to please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. And also a reminder that JNS is launching its first international policy summit about the post-October 7th situation. And it's at the end of this month, and you can register both in the banner, on the banner that's on our video, and also on jns.org on the website. All right, so let's get started, Mark. I think we have no choice but to talk about a topic that, due to all kinds of internal issues in Israel, has been sort of put on the back burner, at least by the media. And that is the Islamic Republic of Iran and what is going on in Israel and in the United States in relation to that.
You're 100% correct, because this is, stories come and stories go, and things get a lot of media attention and other things don't. And if that's your level of what's important and what's not important, you can be led down the wrong path. The Iranian issue is the number one issue for Israel's national security. And we've seen developments over the last week which are significant, which need to be discussed. And the most important thing is what's coming out of Washington. That's the big change, where you've got a much more forthright tone to the Iranians. And it's not just in words, it's also in deeds. The Americans basically have said to the Iranians, right, either we have a deal that ends your nuclear program and dismantles your nuclear program. I hope I'm not overstating that, yes, within a specific time period, or there'll be a military option. And this is very new. It's very different from the way the previous administration put it. And I don't think I'm saying any state secrets when I say the new line out of Washington, the current line coming out of Washington is much more appealing to Israeli ears.
Well, it's new and it's not new, because it's new if you're comparing it to the Biden administration. But if you compare it to the first Trump administration, well, let's not forget that Trump was when he entered office the first time, he ripped up the JCPOA, the nuclear deal with Iran that the Obama administration signed. And not only did he do that, but he stepped up severe sanctions on the regime, financial sanctions. Then when Biden entered office, he basically allowed the flow of billions of dollars back into Iran, and Iran was able to push full speed ahead with its program. And though the left likes to say that that's all because Trump ripped up the deal, that's nonsense. So what's interesting about Trump's latest threat was, what he said was, if you don't come to the table within 2 months, in other words, we have another month left, the beginning of May, then you will be bombed, and the bombing will be the likes of which you haven't seen before. Now, what is interesting about that is two things. One is that we know that Trump and this administration, the Republicans in general and Trump in particular, do not want American boots on the ground at all anywhere, interestingly. And so the idea was, many people said, they're very isolationist. They don't want wars. He did say, I'm going to make peace in the Middle East and between Ukraine and Russia. However, though he said that, he's been bombing Yemen to take out the Houthi missiles because they're endangering all Red Sea trade, the trade that goes through. And it's also a warning to Iran. But not only did he do that, he moved, I think, 6 B-2 stealth bombers to Diego Garcia, and they're pointing at Yemen and Iran. They also have the capability of reaching Iran. So while he's bombing Yemen, he's also warning Iran, and it makes it a credible threat. So then the question is, what part does Israel play in this, if at all?
So what in the words of international relations, what Trump is doing is called coercive diplomacy. In other words, he's saying, I want to negotiate. I'm prepared to make a deal, but there's a big stick there that if you don't go down that path, if you continue with what you've been doing, Iranians, there will be consequences. And he's put a timeline on those consequences. He said, you've got 2 months, and as you say, only 1 month left to start serious negotiations about your nuclear program. And I think the fundamental truth is this: when you're dealing with a regime like the Iranian regime, right? And we've seen how the Iranian regime treats its own people, yes, how they brutalize and stamp down with utmost brutality against internal opposition. And we have to have no illusions how they would treat foreign populations. And they repeatedly say their goal is, and unfortunately they mean it, it's not just words, that Israel should be destroyed. They want to see the Middle East as part of this sort of Iranian empire, where everyone follows the mullahs in Tehran. They are a threat to Israel, a threat to the West, and they have to be taken seriously. And this sort of coercive diplomacy, this sort of carrying a big stick, is the only way to get a message through to the Iranians. I remember Netanyahu years ago said, if you want a good deal with Iran, you have to have a credible military option. Without that, the Iranians aren't going to make the concessions. They're not going to voluntarily dismantle their nuclear program. You have to have a credible military threat. I don't think that was ever particularly credible under the previous administration. I think for the Iranians under this current administration, it is extremely credible, the military threat, precisely because they remember better than anyone else that it was under President Trump in his first term that General Soleimani, the head of the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, the man that was in charge of Iranian terror activities across the Middle East and the world, the man who positioned Iranian proxies in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, the man who was in charge of the international terrorist operation out of Tehran. The Americans assassinated him. They took him out. And that was under Trump's watch. And so I think today, actually, it's a pivotal point. It's a moment of truth for the regime in Tehran, and it's a moment of truth also for Israel and the United States, because if the Iranians refuse to negotiate seriously and dismantle their nuclear program, that means if we don't follow through, then our future comments will be not taken seriously by Tehran. You can't put a deadline on the table. You can't say negotiate a deal or else. Then you've got a problem.
Yeah, well, we've seen some of those ultimatums and deadlines, not to put too fine a point on it, also in relation to Gaza. So I wouldn't necessarily hold him to that particular date. However, it is interesting that Iran did respond. Iran said 2 things. As usual, Iran lies. And also, I mean, the mullahs and the supreme leader and the president, they lie by saying they had no nuclear, their nuclear program is only for peaceful purposes. And then they say, and anyway, it was America that violated the nuclear deal. And anyway, if America and Israel attack us, then we'll have to develop a nuclear weapon. But meanwhile, they're broadcasting on various terrorist TV channels, these massive underground missile, I don't know what you even call it, sort of missile, not a factory. It's more like a museum. It's just missiles all over and massive tunnels underground. So that's one thing. But this brings me to to 2 other points. One has to do with America's national intelligence head of U.S. National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who very strangely just came out to say that there's no evidence that Iran actually is building a nuclear weapon. It isn't and hasn't been since 2003. And yes, they're enriching uranium to the most dangerous levels ever, but they're not really working toward building a bomb in the meantime. So I think that is a very reckless statement, particularly in view of Trump's threat to Iran. That's one thing. I mean, Why should a high U.S. intelligence official give fodder to the enemy that way? That's one thing. Also, I can't believe that anyone thinks that they're not working toward a bomb. But the other thing is that Israel has facilitated any any strike, any military strike that the U.S. may undertake by having hit all of Iran's air defenses, and that was in October with 3 waves of massive strikes in Tehran. And we took out. They're completely vulnerable. So now it should be time to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak.
I think that's 100% correct, that last point. Iran is much weaker and more vulnerable than it was this time last year. First of all, we spoke about it already. The American presence is much more in the region. As you said, as I said, the moving of American forces, those American bombers in Diego Garcia, American aircraft carriers, and so forth. The American presence is here. It's here, obviously, as part of the fight against Yemen, but all the Iranians know very well that those forces, that naval and other forces that are attacking the Houthis, Iran's proxy in Yemen, can also be used against them. And that beefed up presence of the U.S. military is, the Iranians must be sweating. But you add to that even before the beefed up American presence, because of what Israel did, for our own reasons, for our own very good reasons, has also made them vulnerable. So it's a combination of 2 factors. Iran built its regional strategy for hegemony on 2 pillars. One pillar was to surround Israel with terror armies in the north, in the east, in the south, right? And they were successful. They built up in Syria and in Lebanon and in Iraq and in Yemen and in Gaza. They built up these forces with missiles. I mean, when you think of terrorists, yes, you think of a few people, hijacking a plane with a Kalashnikov AK-47, right? No, they built up these terror armies trying to surround Israel, to encircle Israel. They spent billions to build up this formidable terror machine. And over the last few months, as part of Israel's response to October 7th, that machine has been largely dismantled. Assad, who was their main state proxy, fell from power. In Lebanon, Hezbollah has been put in a box, not eliminated, but it's definitely playing defense. It's not the same Hezbollah we faced this time last year.
Well, all its leadership
has
totally
been destroyed.
Demolished.
A lot of its weapons have been destroyed, and the Lebanon, and you see how it responds when Israel, like we did earlier this week, when we target a senior Hezbollah person for good reason, they don't respond because they're worried. They're worried. And the terror machine built in Gaza, we are in the process, we've largely destroyed it. We've got more things to do there. So the whole Iranian encirclement strategy has been destroyed. Now, the other part of their strategy is the nuclear program, which, Iran even a failed state like North Korea with a nuclear program, you have to take them seriously. And Iran is the same. Though we've pushed them back and they're playing defense and their whole encirclement strategy has fallen apart, their nuclear program remains a problem. But this is now the optimum moment to try to deal with the issue. And it has to be solved one way or the other. Diplomacy, and the President of the United States says he prefers a diplomatic solution. And if that proves impossible, then it has to be done the other way, through the use of force.
Well, so do you think that Israel should be launching a joint operation with the United States against the Iranian nuclear facilities? Or if the United States doesn't do it very soon, as Israel keeps saying, the time is running out. All these experts are saying we're at the wire. We've reached, time is running out. Now, of course, we've heard this now for a few years. So I don't know what's accurate. But if so, should Israel go it alone? Can Israel go it alone? Is it wise for Israel to go it alone?
So first of all, there's a doctrine. It's called the Begin Doctrine, after the late Menachem Begin, who was Prime Minister of Israel, who in 1981 attacked and destroyed Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor outside Baghdad. And he took a decision, and he said, we cannot allow a murderous dictator, a crazy murderous dictator like Saddam Hussein to get his hand on nuclear weapons. And when that was brought to the cabinet, military intelligence said that the risks of the operation outweigh the possible benefits, and apparently the Mossad was against it too. But he nevertheless, and some of his ministers were against it. Begin pushed it through, and there's no doubt that that attack destroyed the Iraqi nuclear program, and Iraq never afterwards managed to develop nuclear weapons. There was a similar situation this century. Prime Minister Olmert, who I don't believe you're a great fan of, but he nonetheless, in 2007, took out a secret nuclear facility in Syria, a North Korean-supported nuclear facility that was being done very quietly. The Mossad found out it was there, and the Israeli Air Force took care of it. The Americans, Olmert consulted with President Bush at the time. He consulted with them and he asked them, are you going to do anything about that? And when they basically gave a negative answer, so he said, well, it's our problem then. And he took a decision. And that nuclear reactor was destroyed. And think of it, with everything that happened in Syria since, yes, the civil war and the falling of it. Imagine if you have had a crazy regime there, an extreme regime, which was facing, the challenge that Assad's regime changed. If they had nuclear weapons, what could have been? So it's a very good thing Israel did, not just for ourselves, but for the entire region, that Olmert took that decision and took out that Syrian nuclear reactor. I think the same applies today for Israel. If we believed that the Iranians were close to a bomb, I think there is incumbent upon the Israeli government to do what's possible. And just as there will be experts who say, well, you can't have a total solution, you can't stop it totally, there's great risks involved, all that is true. All that is true. But you've got to say, what if you don't act? What are the risks then? And I think, once again, it's incumbent upon the Israeli government to act. If we see, unless we act, they're going to get a nuclear weapon, you have to act.
Right. So first of all, I was all in favor of Olmert's bombing of the Syrian reactor. But that was before he became a radical leftist protester. I don't know what. His marbles got screwed up over there like a few of these guys. But what is also true is that both the Iraqi reactor and the Syrian reactor, they were very finite structures. Iran has facilities spread out. It's a massive country. Some are above ground, some we know about. A lot are way beneath ground. And we don't necessarily, I don't know, have the right bunker busters also to conduct an operation like that. It's not just it's one operation. They're spread out there. It's a way more complicated operation. But also one other thing I wanted to say, which is that America could do it much more quickly, efficiently, etc. And then, although I'm sure that there are going to be all those terrific anti-Semites, including on the right in America, including some of the isolationists in the Trump circle, like Tucker Carlson, who would say, if America did that, you're acting on behalf of the Zionists or something like that. So it's always better for us to do it. But the question is now, do you think that the fact that today, it was announced yesterday that starting today, the Homefront Command is going to tweak our rocket alert system to warn us about long-range missiles on their way several minutes, the ones that take a long time to get to Israel, several minutes before the actual sirens are set off. Do you think there's a connection to that? Does that mean we're anticipating either that we're going to initiate something or that America is and that Iran is necessarily going to retaliate by striking Israel?
So, first of all, it's home defense. And as you know, in Israel, we take home defense very, very seriously. And long-range missiles have been coming from Yemen. And, since fighting we started in Gaza 2 weeks ago, I think we've had some 12 rockets fired from Yemen to Israel, and not a single one exploded inside Israel, causing damage or destruction or death. All of them were destroyed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, outside before they entered Israeli airspace. And so our defense system, our homeland defense system of taking out incoming rockets is being tested and is shown to be very, very effective. And I think the Iranians are watching that very closely too. But I think also when we announce something, when Israel announces that we're improving our homeland defense, that's a message to them that we're serious.
Well, this is just an alert system.
Yeah, but but they hear us talking about it. That means they know we're getting ready.
They know we're paying attention. I see, because it's true that one of the things, I mean, you said, well, there were 12 missiles from Yemen. I think people outside of Israel don't really grasp what that means. First of all, that's just in the very recent history.
Correct, last 2 weeks.
Since October
almost a missile a day.
We've had so many, exactly. Now, I think the reason, first of all, it's true that even when they're intercepted, what they say before it reaches Israeli territory, shrapnel hits Israeli territory. It's deadly because, people think of shrapnel as some kind of little pieces of metal. These are massive chunks that look like the missiles themselves that can easily kill people. One landed in a schoolyard this last week. The point is that it sends millions of Israelis into bomb shelters. It's giving, children are terrified. They're in school or they're in nursery school and they have to run to shelters, and it disrupts life. So even when it doesn't kill anybody, it's a message, and it disrupts our life in a way that I think it's hard for people outside to grasp. That's one thing. So they even accomplish that. Even if they don't manage to kill us, they manage to send us scurrying from whatever.
Can I tell you, I had a personal experience. I was flying to London last week, as you know, because we did the show and I was there and you were here. But I was actually, you're waiting in the line for the security check and you're waiting in half an hour and waiting. I was finally about to be checked by the young woman who was, making sure that I was kosher before I got on a plane. And just as I was about to get on, the siren went off, and I was very upset because I've been waiting in the line for 1 hour. So I said to the woman, when we get the all clear, I'm the first in the line. And that was,
that's what you're worried about.
Of course. I think a lot of Israelis, I don't want to say we're blasé about it, but we're more upset.
We're used to it.
We're used to it, and we're more upset that we get woken up in the middle of the night, than actually thinking the missile's going to hit our house, right? Because, But you said something very important before when you said the target in Iraq, the Iraqi nuclear reactor and the Syrian nuclear reactor were concentrated in a single area, and it was an easier, cleaner target for the Israeli Air Force. And that Iran is a bigger country and it's spread out and part of the targets are deeply underground and so forth. And you asked a number of questions, which are good questions and relevant questions, and I want to try to answer at least some of them. Number one, I said before that Menachem Begin was advised by experts, that this is dangerous and the risks outweigh the possible benefits. You don't have to totally destroy the program. You have to hit a bottleneck that just slows them down. If you can defer their program a few years, then something else can happen. In other words, you don't have to have a perfect solution. Once again, the risks of attacking always have to be weighed against the risks of doing nothing, allowing them to cross the nuclear threshold. Secondly, you are 100% correct when you say they're spread out and therefore it's not one target. But our intelligence of Iran is pretty good. And we can see that with the different Israeli operations that have happened in Iran, from taking out senior terrorists who are in the capital to taking out nuclear scientists, all sorts of things, right? We have been capable. I think we've got good intelligence. We know, I can't say with total confidence that we know where everything is, but I think we've got, 95% we know where everything is. Could we hit those targets? Now, obviously, if we had a coordinated strike with the United States, that would be the best. America has capabilities that Israel does not have. We don't have B-2 bombers, right? Like they moved to Diego Garcia. But could Israel do it by itself if we needed to do it by ourselves? Especially in a situation like the attack on the Syrian reactor, where the Americans understand we need to do this. And
although they said don't. Don't forget.
Yeah, you're right. But they didn't do anything to stop us.
No.
But I think I think that because President Trump has been so strong on this issue, I think there's a good chance that Israel and the United States could act together. If I have a fear, what is he saying to the Iranians? He's saying to them, we either start negotiations on a deal within 2 months or military option. That's what he says. Do you have confidence that he would get the sort of deal that we wouldn't get an Obama deal plus? Because here the devil is in the details. Because the Iranians could say we agreed to negotiate, and then they could just drag out the negotiations, which is one thing. And they could also, in deals, people compromise. Are you convinced as an Israeli, as a Zionist, that President Trump would stand firm on the red lines that need to be, that their nuclear program actually has to be dismantled?
Well, it's not that I would doubt President Trump's intentions or standing firm. I doubt all deals with terrorist entities and terrorist states. That is why we see it again and again with Israel. We saw it with Gaza. We see it with Lebanon. So when you ask me, I don't like that word deal, because with people like that, you can't make a deal. You make a deal, they violate it. You then say, okay, we have to monitor it. But then the monitoring people say, no, well, we can't get in. Listen, it reminds me of the Red Cross not being allowed to see the hostages in Gaza. The issue is not whether he means it and he's careful about the deal itself. The problem is that you cannot make deals with terrorists. And when you do, you're sorry. Sometimes, as you said, it postpones the inevitable, which maybe is important to buy time. But I'll tell you something. You said that there were military experts in Israel as well that said to Begin, the risks outweigh the benefits. Well, let me tell you something. We have seen, and we saw what happened on October 7th. All our experts saying, oh, no, it's too risky. We saw what happened on October 7th, and that is because the assessment was that it's far more risky to preempt something against Hamas in Gaza than not to. And all that it got us was mass slaughter, rapes, beheadings, burnings, kidnappings. It is, and now, the answer to that was, well, we wouldn't have had legitimacy to do it. Well, you know something? Too bad. I would rather have, by the way, the international community said we weren't legitimate anyway. But what I'm saying is I would rather be a pariah than watch innocent, thousands of, first of all, innocent people getting killed and all that, but also soldiers, our precious soldiers getting killed. It is, so I, of course, you asked me, I believe in preemption. And yes, and you said, rightly, question is it riskier not to? Now, after October 7th, I'm sorry, anybody who doesn't look at himself in the mirror and say, that's an example. Now, that wasn't nuclear, but it was so horrific and we could have prevented it. But we didn't, because of all those considerations. And by the way, one other thing you said about Syria. Imagine if Syria had nuclear weapons, if Assad had the Assad regime, and you're right, that regime used chemical weapons against
its own people.
Its people. So of course it would have had no problem using nukes. And make no mistake, the Iranians, whatever they may be, they're clearly severely weakened, and their economy is weakened, and the people are taken to the streets again. But make no mistake, they are they are jihadist ideologues who believe in martyrdom for Allah and in all of that stuff. And the West can't look at them with Western eyes.
So, first of all, you're right on the issue of October 7th, which has changed. It's been a slap across the face for Israelis in the way we think about our defense, right? And
some of us, Mark.
October 7th has affected the way we think. And I asked the following question. On October 7th, Hamas attacked and killed over 1,200 Israelis. Had they had the capability to do so, would they have killed 12,000 Israelis?
Of course.
Had they had the capability to do so, would they have killed 120,000 Israelis?
No question.
Had they had the capability, would they have killed 1,200,000 Israelis? And the answer, I think, for most Israelis would answer it exactly the same way you did. Of course they would. And so the idea is when you've got an extremely genocidal terror regime like you have in Tehran, you just can't let them get their finger on the nuclear trigger. There's just it has to be for Israel a priority which cannot be put aside. For America, obviously, I would say the following: all of Asia today, shakes in their boots because of the North Koreans having a nuclear device. Iran is much more serious than North Korea because Iran is a revolutionary ideology. Iran has got followers and proxies. Or it had more proxies before Israel started taking care of them. But Iran as a threat is much more serious than North Korea. They simply cannot be allowed to pass the nuclear threshold, bottom line.
No, absolutely. But we've been saying that. And so has Prime Minister Netanyahu for years, for decades. This is not new.
Now it's the moment of truth now.
Right. So the question is, and by the way, meanwhile, this is a huge deal, and it's a huge deal that the Trump administration has actually taken real military steps against Yemen. It's amazing. And I hope that Tehran believes that makes that even a more credible threat for Tehran. But what I don't understand is why the Israeli public is sort of looking the other way, still busy, not all of the public, but half of the public who have decided that it's Netanyahu's fault, that there's still hostages in Gaza, etc. And there's and the experts you mentioned, all our military and our intelligence experts who are responsible for this false idea of what it means of Hamas having been deterred, but not just that. It's a larger ideology within the Israeli defense establishment, not the soldiers and not the establishment. And they're still at it, Mark. You said we learned a lesson from October 7th. Those people are still at it, and they would rather fight Netanyahu and his advisors and all that, and the courts would rather do that than face the real enemies. And it's not just Hamas is still a big problem, but we're surrounded by enemies, and Iran is the main one. Why is anybody even thinking about anything else without dealing with that? Of course, we need all the hostages home. Without dealing with Iran, all we're going to have is many more dead Jews, and they're planning it. There's a credible threat around the world of Iranian-funded individual terrorists planning over the Passover holiday to attack Israelis and Jews elsewhere in the world.
There was a specific warning put out by the National Security Council in Israel, warning Israelis coming Passover holidays. A lot of them like to go overseas, to be careful. And from media reports, we know there were specific warnings given to specific Israeli businessmen who were active in certain countries that they should come home. And we know the terror threat is very serious. I would say on the Iranian issue, I talked about how, America's beefed up its presence. Israel has already made Iran much more vulnerable by taking out, last October, their radar and their missile defenses and all those things. They're all that. But we haven't spoken, and maybe just a word, maybe internally they're also more vulnerable than ever before because the regime is hated by the Iranian people. We see the protesters, and you've got to respect the protesters because it's not like a democracy. They can't protest and then go home and have a cup of tea, right? They are in a country where if you protest against the regime, you face violent retribution from that regime. Knocks on the door in the middle of the night, and who knows what they'll do to your family and so forth. And so is there a possibility now that you've got America and Israel and the changes in the region that we've brought about since October 7th, together with a situation inside Iran, maybe it really is an opportunity to have this issue that's been on the table for so long to finally put it behind us and to have a situation where Iran no longer has this advanced nuclear program that they can weaponize just so quickly if they make a decision to do so. Maybe And we're coming to the end of our podcast, but maybe 2025 will be the year that the problem of the Iranian nuclear program is finally solved.
Well, I certainly hope so. And I have to say, risk, no risk. I believe, and I have believed this all along, in general, when you have enemies facing you, that the risk is greater not to take care of them, to take them out. And I really hope that we don't chicken out of this really, really crucial move, because otherwise we're going to, and including if we have to live in our bomb shelters for a while.
So I am hopeful that this is a moment. If in the last couple of months the Middle East has changed in a more positive direction for Israel, for the West, I'm hopeful that it's going to continue to move in a good direction and that this will be solved. And if we sit here this time next year, I hope we'll have an Iran without any nuclear program and the capability to make bombs, one way or the other.
Amen, Mark.
See you again next week, Ruthie.